I'm 47, and I just found out that my partner of 7 years, Mark, who's 59, has been carrying on a secret relationship with a woman in another city. Apparently, this has been going on for at least 8 months before I even suspected a thing. Mark's been traveling for years, supposedly researching for a book. Turns out, he was messing with the location settings on his iPad, leaving it at the hotel while he was elsewhere. I started noticing odd patterns. My texts would sit unread for hours, or he wouldn't pick up my calls. And it always seemed to happen when he was in this one specific city. Sometimes, his location wouldn't even leave the hotel all day. When I brought it up, he had a dozen different excuses. He'd say he was so absorbed in his writing that he lost track of time. Or he'd blame his phone, claiming it wasn't working right. Other times he'd say something like, "What are you talking about?" I did reply. And when all else failed, he'd tell me he didn't want to interrupt me because he knew I was busy, even though I was the one trying to reach him. If I pressed the issue, he'd get irritated, saying I was nagging him and that he'd never treat me that way. Whenever I asked him about what exactly he was researching in that city, his answers were vague. He'd say, "Oh, you'd find it boring." And I'd challenge him to explain, but somehow, he'd always steer the conversation elsewhere. Mark's good at that, changing the subject before I can pin him down. I guess I felt so secure in our relationship that I didn't see the signs for a long time. We don't live together, and I know that sounds strange to some people, but it works, or at least it used to work, for us. We both have complicated lives. We live just a short flight apart, and see each other every couple of weeks. Mark usually visits me more often because I work a Monday to Friday job, while he's a writer with a flexible schedule. A couple of months ago, though, he went back to that city, and I paid closer attention to his location. I don't know if he forgot to mess with the settings or brought the wrong device, but his dot showed up at a house in a residential area, not his usual hotel. He was there the whole afternoon and evening and didn't respond to my calls or texts. I took a screenshot of his location and looked up the address. That's when I found her. It didn't take long. They're connected on social media. Mark has a lot of followers but doesn't follow many people, and she was one of the few he did. I started piecing things together. I found her Goodreads profile and noticed that last year, she'd read all the same books he had. Then I cross-checked my calendar with our call and text history during his trips to that city. I came up with 6 trips where something didn't add up. Thanksgiving was coming up, and Mark was supposed to spend it with me and my extended family. I wrestled with what to do. When he arrived, I didn't confront him outright. Instead, I asked, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Over the next couple of days, I tried to steer our conversations toward our relationship, hoping he'd come clean. But nothing. He was affectionate, acting completely normal. I didn't want to accuse him outright without proof. He's the kind of person who blows up if he feels wrongly accused. So I tried to create a safe space for him to open up, thinking we could handle it calmly together. I guess I was too scared to face a blowout. I ran out of ways to ask and eventually just asked him if he was happy with our long-distance arrangement, especially since he'd planned to move in with me this year once his youngest kid left for college. He said everything was fine, great even. When I dropped him off at the airport to fly home, I thought that was it. But he didn't fly home. Instead, he flew straight to her city without mentioning a word to me. His location stopped updating in the airport's pickup area. I tried calling him about 10 minutes later, then again 30 minutes after that, and once more 45 minutes later. On the third try, the call was immediately declined. I texted, "I know what you're doing." But the message didn't go through. The next morning, I sent her a short email. I wrote, "Hi, I'm Mark's partner. He left here yesterday and turned off his location when he landed. Is he with you?" A couple of hours passed with no reply. That's when my text, "I know what you're doing," finally went through, but it still showed as unread. That's when reality hit me like a truck. This was real. He was cheating. I had a full-blown panic attack. My hands went numb, and I couldn't breathe properly. I cycled in and out of panic for 2 days straight. Thankfully, the physical symptoms have started to fade, but even now, as I write this, I get shaky. Sleep has been a nightmare. I can't seem to rest properly. I'm trying to get on a therapist's schedule because I know I need help to work through this. After everything, I decided to stop sharing my location with Mark and removed him from Find My. It was like a small act of reclaiming some control, but it didn't make me feel much better. Not knowing exactly what happened between him and this woman was eating me alive. My sense of reality felt completely shattered. I kept running scenarios in my head, trying to piece it all together. I wanted to hear it straight from him so I could stop obsessing over the timeline. So, I kept calling him. On the third day, he finally answered. He was back at home, and the first thing he did was lash out at me for contacting her. He said I'd crossed a line and violated her privacy. Then he had the audacity to ask why I hadn't just come to him first. I reminded him that I had tried, several times. I asked him directly to explain what was going on and what his relationship with her really was. But he wouldn't give me a straight answer. Instead, he got defensive and said, "No, you tell me what you know first." That's when he started drip-feeding me bits of the truth. He refused to say anything unless I specifically asked about it. So I went through my list of dates and incidents. It was exhausting. He got angrier and angrier, calling it an interrogation, but he didn't hang up. We were on the phone for 2 hours before he finally muttered an apology. But even then, it felt hollow, like he only said it because I asked him to. He spent most of the call justifying his actions, blaming me for neglecting him and making him unhappy, which he claimed led him to cheat. It was more like, "I'm sorry, but you need to understand why I did it," than an actual apology. He told me that the other woman had shown him my email while he was at her house. Apparently, they had a big blow-up about it, but instead of leaving, he stayed with her for 2 more days so they could talk it out. He said she forgave him. He also claimed that she always knew he wasn't available for a serious relationship and that there was someone else in his life, she just didn't know the details. Honestly, that doesn't sound believable to me, considering how upset he said she was. He told me, "You dropped a bomb on her." I shot back, "No, you dropped the bomb on both of us." I pointed out that it sounded like he'd lied to her too, and as soon as I used the word lied, he completely lost it. He yelled, "Don't use that word. That's your version of the story. You're not even listening to mine." I feel like a complete fool for saying this, but for the past month, we've been trying to reconcile over the phone. At first, I just wanted to get his side of the story so I could make sense of everything and start healing. Then I found myself holding on, hoping he'd show some real remorse. I even thought maybe this could be a wake-up call for our relationship, and we could rebuild something together. Believe me, I'm still trying to figure out why I'd even consider putting myself through this. It took 2 weeks of painstaking conversations to get him to share the details because he claims he can't remember the timeline or what they did together. The only way he'll talk about specific rendezvous is if I dig through my calendar and old texts to catch him in a lie, then confront him about that exact time. So far, I've gotten him to admit to about 10 meetings with her. When I asked if there were more, he said, "I don't think so." Like it wasn't a big deal. His forgetfulness about the details is astonishing. I've also learned that he flew her out to meet him in different places multiple times, once even to Europe. He spoofed his location to make me think he was at home. He even has a second phone with a number I didn't know about. When I expressed shock about some of their trips, he downplayed it, saying all their travel was spontaneous and last minute. Now, he's growing frustrated with my insistence on discussing the affair. He keeps asking, "When can we move on and focus on the real issue?" To him, the real issue is his unhappiness and my supposed neglect of him that forced him to cheat. He claims he originally sought a friendship with her because he was lonely, but that it accidentally turned romantic and he didn't know how to stop it. At first, he swore they were just friends, but when I pressed him, specifically asking if they'd had sex, he admitted they did. He told me he didn't really want to travel with her but did it because I couldn't travel with him. He insists their relationship wasn't serious, and says he still wants to be with me. He's even suggested couples counseling to work through our issues. What makes this all the more maddening is that one of our very first conversations, back when we started dating, was about how important fidelity and trust are to him. We both agreed we were on the same page about that. We're not married, but we've always been exclusive, or so I thought. We used to share our locations, and I'd send him pictures of whoever I was with if I went out in the evening. If I went somewhere out of the ordinary, he'd text or call me right away. At the time, I thought it was love, but now I'm wondering if it was just control and projection on his part. And now, after all this, he has the nerve to tell me, "Well, we're not married, so I didn't think of us as being in an exclusive relationship." This is news to me. Since the revelation, I haven't been sure about the exact nature of his relationship with the other woman, but now I'm paying attention to everything he says, listening closely to my gut. A few days ago, he let slip something she had said to him, which confirmed that they've been in contact. I asked him directly, "What is the nature of your relationship with her right now?" He hesitated before admitting that they're still in touch, talking on the phone every few days. He said he's helping her with some administrative tasks that he has experience with, and in return, she's helping him understand that what he did was wrong. I was furious, but I tried to keep calm as I responded as firmly as I could. I told him, "I can't control what you do, and I can't control if you continue your relationship with her. But I can control what I'm willing to accept. And I won't accept you continuing contact with her if we're going to salvage what's left of our relationship." He got angry at that, and insisted that her friendship is important to him. He said they started out as friends and couldn't understand why that couldn't continue. He even tried to compare it to my friendships, saying, "I need friends too. You have friends, and I don't stop you from seeing them." I snapped back. "This isn't a friendship. This is a full-blown romantic relationship that you developed with her behind my back and lied about." He really hates it when I use words like lied or cheated, and it's almost guaranteed to make him either start talking over me or hang up. He told me that when I use those words, it's just me telling my version of events and not respecting his side of the story. I told him, "Well, you did lie to me. How am I supposed to trust you?" He responded by saying, "If you can't trust me after all these years, then we have a serious problem." I reminded him that he destroyed all of our trust the moment he cheated on me, and if we're going to fix anything, we have to rebuild that trust together. I said, "It's either her or me. You can't have both." We argued for a while, and then he hung up. 2 hours later he called back, saying that he talked to her and that she had agreed to step back while we work things out. I didn't say anything at the time, but the phrasing really stuck with me. She agreed to step back, not him. This is when I made a huge mistake. I had his web hosting passwords from when I made his website for him, but I never used them before because I knew it would be a violation of his trust, and I was afraid that if I did, he'd get so angry we'd never come back from it. But I was desperate to know the truth, so I decided I was going to find out, and then I'd walk away. I went through all their email exchanges over the past year, and no surprise, he's still lying to both of us. She had no idea about me or our relationship until I sent her that email. It turns out, he was the one who instigated everything and actively pursued her. I found out that there were even more rendezvous that he didn't mention to me, and the trips they took were far from spontaneous. They were planned weeks in advance. He arranged the travel, booked the hotels, and bought her plane tickets. There are emails from him to her since D-Day. He was still helping her with life admin stuff, like sending links and sharing news articles. But there's nothing in writing that suggests they've had any relationship conversations. I'm guessing he saves those for the phone calls. It's clear now he's been careful not to leave a trail. And I noticed something else. He stopped replying to my emails entirely. But when I read her responses to his messages, it's obvious they've been trying to reconcile for the past month. It looks like he's been apologizing and expressing remorse to her, while painting me as unstable and our relationship as uncertain, on again, off again. She's been incredibly supportive, waiting for him to wrap things up with me so he can return to her with a clear conscience. I also found out they're already planning their travels for the upcoming summer. I can't tell him what I know, or how I know it, and I'm starting to think he might even try to press charges against me for snooping. I feel terrible about myself for spying on both of them, but at least now I have the truth. I'm taking what I know, and I'm walking away. That's my story now. I don't want to hear any more of his.